Okay, Ayuk, what do you think? Is this cap increase? Does it change their thinking? I mean, and I'm hearing teams like the Raiders and the Giants are going to come correct with some serious offers for Ayuk. I mean, this is a weird deal because like Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, they were all really good receivers, and they all asked to get traded, and they all got their wish and got traded. Is Ayuk? Some of the dialogue around Ayuk's really interesting. And then a guy called me last night, a buddy of mine who always is has wild ideas, but he's a big Niner fan, and he's like, Minnesota can't get it together with Justin Jefferson. Why don't the Niners trade Ayuk to Minnesota in a deal for Jefferson? And I was like, wow, that would be incredible to have Justin Jefferson. But Jefferson's trying to reset the market over Tyreek Hill's money. The market's not set. Ayuk's going to get paid a ton. He only had 3 catches in each of the 3 playoff games. Where are you with Ayuk? Would you pay him? Would you trade him? What do you want in return if you do trade him?
I would pay him, and I think he's everything that the Niners want in a wide receiver. And you think about the whole process of his career up to this point, right? He was a JUCO guy before he went to Arizona State.
Yeah.
So the Niners really had to do their due diligence in scouting him and looking into him. And they had him higher on their draft board than a lot of other people in the 2020 draft. So they used the 25th overall pick on a former JUCO product when at the time that pick was getting ripped by a lot of people. Do we remember how pumped up Kyle Shanahan was when the Niners drafted Ayuk? He was elated from a guy that doesn't show a lot of emotion, right? So he's pumped up. And the Niners have invested a lot of time and effort into developing him. And I thought it was really impressive how he gets drafted 25th overall, COVID offseason, and there's no preseason games. There's limited training camp practices. Yet Ayuk comes out in 12 games. And I know that that was the injury plague season for San Francisco coming off of Super Bowl 54, but he led the Niners in receiving as a rookie. And then in year 2, after some growing pains, partially because of him, partially because Shanahan is a little bit stubborn, as we know, former wide receiver coach's son, who always tries to nitpick a little bit. That's part of the reason why he's an elite coach in this league. Remember when Ayuk's in the doghouse to start 2021? And then he comes out of the doghouse because he's not putting forward a lot of effort in blocking, in the run game. He starts to do that. He ends 2021 on a tear. And then last year, for the first time, surpasses 1,000 receiving yards. This year, he ends up being a second-team All-Pro, and he was a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. So the Niners draft him, hoping that at some point he's going to be a wide receiver 1, when they already had Deebo Samuel coming off that rookie year in which he was an impact player as a rookie for a Super Bowl team. And Ayuk has ended up being a wide receiver 1. So you draft him 25th, you invest all this time in him. Now he wants to get paid and you're just not going to pay him. I think the Niners are going to do everything in their power to pay him for the reasons that I mentioned. But look at the Niners' previous history. George Kittle, contract extension. Fred Warner, contract extension. Deebo Samuel, contract extension. They did the same with Nick Bosa last year. So that's consecutive years in which the Niners have prioritized paying their homegrown players. And Ayuk really embodies what Shanahan is all about and what this Niners team is all about. Player development, growth, highly skilled, but also tough, rugged, physical, embracing blocking in the run game. He was the number 1, and this is no surprise, blocking wide receiver in the NFL. Ended up being probably a better deep threat than the Niners ever envisioned. And you have a young quarterback here in Brock Purdy, who finally, under Kyle Shanahan, we see what this offense can look like with the vertical threat. Ayuk has been that, and he's a great weapon for Purdy. So the only reason that I think Ayuk leaves is if he wants wide receiver 1 money that the Niners aren't willing to pay him, or he wants out because he wants wide receiver 1 targets, knowing that the Niners can't give him wide receiver 1 targets in an offense that is loaded with a bunch of skill players. But then I think back to locker room cleanout day. Did you see how emotional Brandon Aiyuk was? He could not believe that the Niners lost that game, but you could see how much he loved this team and his teammates. He was crying. So does Aiyuk want to go to the Las Vegas Raiders where he has a connection with Antonio Pierce going back to Arizona State when Herm Edwards was there and Pierce was an assistant? Who's the quarterback going to be for the Raiders? So if you want wide receiver one targets and to be paid like the top wide receiver, how has that worked out for Devontae Adams? He's been frustrated ever since he left Green Bay. So this gives you an opportunity with Kyle Shanahan, with Brock Purdy, who you have kinship with, and an offense that always produces for a team that is always going to be a playoff contender and Super Bowl contender. It sounds like the perfect situation for Aiyuk. I think everything that we're kind of hearing right now, his buddy saying BA to Vegas, his girlfriend and the mother to his son saying this could be our last year, it's all leverage.
Yeah.
Remember when George Kittle's agent was saying it's a Valentine's Day massacre? They signed him. Debo, I want out. They brought him back. Nick Bosa could leave. He's back as well. I think Aiyuk will be back.
I mean, even yourself, it's like, I heard that you took down all of your chat sports stuff on your social media because you want more money. And, this is just what the stars do, right? They wash their social media of their employer. No, I'm just joking, of course. But give me 3 names on the way out the door. 3 names. The number one free agent. Because the Niners almost do this. They let like all the free agents go. They sign one great guy. Give me one great free agent. Who the Niners you think you would pick at 31, and who would be your DC?
Okay, yeah, this is interesting. For
then
anybody
we'll let
saying
you go.
Niners aren't going to pay anybody anything. Okay, you told me the same thing when I brought up a Christian McCaffrey trade on the 49ers report. That's crazy. They're not going to do it. They did.
Right. They did it.
I brought up Javon Hargrave last year. No way. 4-year, $84 million deal. We talk about them paying their homegrown players. They pay, they invest, they understand this is a great opportunity to complete that quest for 6, get a 6 Lombardi trophy with a special group of core players who are future Pro Bowlers, all pros, Hall of Famers that deserve it, right? So I do think that the Niners, especially with the cap increasing, are going to pay. My number one option at defensive coordinator would be Bill Belichick. I'm going all in. He's on the unemployment line. Chase his ego. Why would he want to be a DC? He wants a job. He loves ball, and he's one of the best defensive minds of all time.
And it's the best job available. It's the best job available.
Best job available. And for a football nut and a football historian, you get to go to an organization that has 5 Super Bowls that ironically is trying to tie the Patriots and the Steelers for 6 Lombardi trophies, which would be the most of all time. For an organization that has such a rich history, for a guy whose dad, Steve Belichick, basically wrote the book for how to scout football players decades ago and appreciates the history of the game, Niners give you that. And you think Bill Belichick doesn't want an opportunity to coach a defense that has Fred Warner and Nick Bosa on it with an offensive mind that he trusts and has a relationship with, and Kyle Shanahan, whose dad and Mike Shanahan he's always been close with going back to the late 90s, early 2000s. And so this is a great opportunity for Belichick if he wants to kind of right his wrongs and get in the good graces of another owner to be a head coach next year. I don't care about 2025. I care about 2024. And Bill Belichick moves the needle for me. Now, I don't think that the Niners are going to go that route. Spin zone conspiracy theory. Is everything been kept under wraps because maybe Kyle Shanahan's trying to make some things happen on that front? So Belichick, number 1 option. Vrabel, number 2 option. I don't hate Brandon Staley. That could happen. If it's Nick Sorensen, I have an issue with that. Is that Kyle Shanahan trying to overcorrect for going external for the first time with Steve Wilks and it didn't work out? Now, internal hirings have worked with Robert Saleh, D'Amico Ryans, but I think if you hire a guy like Sorensen or any of the internal candidates, Kyle Shanahan is limiting himself and he's not hiring the best candidate. So those are the names that I throw out there for that. Top free agent option for me would be Brian Burns. You have him and Nick Bosa for the future. And then on offensive line, we talk about Trent Brown. I worry about the attitude a little bit and cultural fit. But if you played under Bill Belichick, it could work under Kyle Shanahan. Robert Hunt is an option there at right guard. Some draft targets that I'm going to throw out there. Graham Barton, interior offensive lineman out of Duke. He played left tackle at Duke, but his arms are short. Niners like offensive linemen who have longer arms. This guy's tape is so consistent. Jordan Morgan is an offensive tackle out of Arizona. Amarius Mims only played like 8 games at Georgia, but is like 6'7", 330 with quick feet. He could be a perennial Pro Bowler. Tyler Guyton had a lot of experience at Oklahoma. He's strictly a right tackle. And then the last name, who I think would be great, but I think he's more of an interior offensive lineman and a guard, and it's a guy who I talked to at the college football playoff back in January. It's Troy Fatanu out of Washington. He's a nasty player who I think could play right away and be really, really good. And I asked him, have you kept tabs on the Niners offense and Kyle Shanahan? He said, yeah, I have. It's one of the best offenses in the NFL. I love the opportunity to play for a team like that. So those are some guys who might be around at 31 that I would try to pinpoint. Maybe with a guy like Fatana, you have to move up a little bit in order to take him.
All right, this is what I'm going with. I'm going with Bill Belichick as the defensive coordinator for all the reasons that you stated, and I think that there's no cap. So there's no cap on what you pay him. So you can pay him 2 years, $25 million and say, Bill, 12.5 a year for the next 2 years. I know that's only half of what he made as a head coach, but for 2 years. And then if you want to let him out, if he wants to walk after one, walk after one. But Belichick absolutely is my first choice defensive coordinator wise. I think my second choice might be Gus Bradley.
Okay.
If I could get Gus Bradley, because he knows this system. So those would be my 2 DCs. If I could go Belichick 1, Bradley 2. My free agents are Brian Burns. I love Brian Burns. I love everything about Burns. I think he's and I don't love the other guys at that spot in the draft. To me, let Chase Young go, let Gregory go, upgrade with Brian Burns. And then my first round draft choice at 31, I love Amarius Mims' frame. I mean, if you watch this guy, he's exactly what you want frame wise.
Yep.
But I think he'll probably go a little higher just because he is so intriguing. I'm going to say I would choose between Tyler Guyton, the road grading run blocker for Oklahoma, played right tackle. Trent Williams says he's a big fan of Guyton's game. And then Darius Robinson, who was the practice player of the week award winner at the Senior Bowl. He's an edge, but he might be able to play inside. He's 6'5", 295. He had 8.5 sacks. To me, there's a lot of Alden Smith in Darius Robinson, but not as troubled, let's say, off the field. So Darius Robinson, Tyler Guyton, Gus Bradley, Bill Belichick, Brian Burns. Let's go.
That's a perfect offseason right there.
Yeah, absolutely.